Thanks for coming, you guys. And I really appreciate this. Elise, are you in the middle of a job, Elise, right now?
I'm in the middle of a job?
Yeah. No. Are you prepping or anything?
No, not yet. Basically, New York, we are only phase 1. So we are not open again, probably no permits until the end of June right now, they're saying earliest.
Oh, really?
So we still have some weeks.
Did you guys hear about this thing? Somebody who was the client went on a set without a mask and didn't social distance.
No.
And the producer was in this really bad spot of like, do I shut the set down? But it's like the client, with the checkbook. So
shut that down.
Shut it down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What? Shut it down? Shut it down?
It's just been like, you need to get a mask on and come back. Or if you're not going to wear a mask, then you can't be on the set. Sorry. Client.
It's
okay.
universal.
Well, maybe we should open with like talking about that. Actually, it's a good thing to talk about.
Where was that? Was that in California?
It was in California, in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I'm sworn to secrecy because it's,
of course.
Yeah. It's like, I don't need this to blow up on me and lose my standing as an okay person.
Throwing people under the bus. It's like,
well, I'm just wondering if there's we could just start talking about this stuff actually. I'm just wondering if there's like a need to create some sort of law or some sort of protection so that there's no blowback from the client to the production company. What do you think? I was going to contact my congressman here and say, like, we got to have something. I mean, how do we deal with this?
I mean, I think in theory, it would be great if there was something across the board that was masks must be worn on set. But I feel like right now, I don't know how it is West Coast, but here, even talking to producer friends, it's very Wild West right now. Everybody's kind of like, okay, we need masks, we need this. Every studio is kind of doing something different in their own way. So it would be nice if there was a central,
like some sort of unity.
Yeah. Just
Philip, are you finding anything like in production? Because you're in a job right now, aren't you?
Well, I've done 2 actually, not in California yet, but the one was in Ohio and the other one was in Georgia, in Atlanta. And to talk about the client thing, we actually have started doing a thing where we have a sort of a crew assumption of risk. We also send something similar to the client and get them to sign off on the very thing, basically saying you're expected to wear a mask before they even show up on set. So at least gives us a point where,
this isn't a surprise type of thing.
This is not a surprise. We're going to point back to it. This is what we're going to do. Now, I haven't had to, everybody's been fully complying and actually thankful for the regulations that we've set in place. It was really interesting to find, and it's like people were really relieved to be working again, but they really wanted to make sure they could continue to work. So like masks and gloves or hand sanitizing and doing the entire thing that has, been out there with so many of the meetings that have been going on about proper set training and whatnot seem to really take hold, at least in the areas I was at. So
yeah, not that this is any comparison, but I got my haircut the other day. And the rules of the salon where you got to put come in through the back door because we're not open for real. But it's like wear a mask, and then the hairstylist wore a mask. And the thing that was kind of interesting about that was after the first 2 minutes, like I didn't really notice the mask. It wasn't that much of a, I mean, it's there, but it just sort of seems, okay, well, this is kind of what we're doing now. I mean, are you guys finding that at all? Or is it weird to be in meetings? Elise, are you finding anything weird in the meetings or anything like that?
I mean, I haven't had any face-to-face meetings. I mean, I feel like though for all of us, it has just kind of turned into, if you leave your house, you grab your mask on the way out the door.
Right.
Like it's just definitely turned into a second nature thing. Everybody that I've talked to, I feel like the same thing is going here, Philip, like you said, people are anxious to get back to work. And with that, they're also anxious to protect themselves and kind of follow the rules on set. And I feel like a lot of it is very common sense. It's like wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, wear a mask,
right.
And that's part of our everyday lives now. So it should become second nature on set.
Yeah, I mean, that was the experience that we were having with it. I think the only thing that I would want to say from a set experience standpoint is that we really built into our schedule essentially 10-minute breaks that we asked everybody to go outside or go to wherever to get non-mask time, because actually the breathing became sort of, I want to say challenging. It was just exhausting, that you were just there all day. And so from a scheduling standpoint, it was really important for us. It's like, we're going to work for 50 minutes and then kind of no matter what we're at, we're going to hard stop, hopefully change into the next, whatever we happen to be doing. And I'm going to encourage you to go outside or go to a different part of the studio. We had an opportunity where we rented an extra studio space. So we had places where people could go and really social distance from each other.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah. Is that sort of like becoming part of the budget? Like we're going to rent an addition, like if you get onto like Carvel City Studios or something, I'm going to rent additional space so people can social distance or something like that?
I'm going to try. I mean, if the budgets will allow, and at this point, the clients seem to be cognizant of what that needed to be. It's like you just need, even if you're in a big space, we tried to basically live with the idea that, still 10 people per 4 walls, no matter what the space is. And then we did hair and makeup and everything all in completely different studio space. So they weren't even impactful in the area, or even, because a lot of the studios will have sub rooms, they'll have a hair and makeup room and whatnot. And it's like, we're not even using those. We're going to just have a completely different studio where people can really spread out. And in this particular case, the budget bared it and the client had no issue with it. I'm hoping that's something.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So at least in New York, things are a little bit more cramped. You have less space available. Do you find a way that you can do the same sort of thing that Philip is doing?
Not necessarily. I mean, we definitely have some full-size studio spaces. And actually, to Philip's point, some studios are actually requiring that you rent 2 spaces. So to basically automatically build in that social distancing, and then they're giving discounts, obviously, for the fact that you're kind of being forced to rent 2 studio spaces. So, I mean, in my mind, I would be doing exactly what Philip is doing and would always rent 2 spaces, just because there's no way you're just on top of each other. And if you have more than one talent as well, that's another.
Right.
Well, I'm excited.
Well, of multiple hair and makeup stations, multiple wardrobe stations, multiple everything stations, and to have that second space. Philip, I'm totally stealing your idea of the 10-minute breaks, just so everybody can have a little.
Actually, we should just make that canon, I think, just like 10-minute breaks on the set. So there's somebody who's chatted in and said that apparently in the UK, wearing a mask is required by law if you're in public transportation. Awesome. So, which is great, which is sort of lends to the normalcy of all this stuff. So
it's the same thing. If you're getting on the subway or a bus, public transportation, you have to wear a mask.
So a question came in about using thermometers. Are you guys going that hardcore, like getting a set medic or a set nurse or something like that?
Well, we didn't do a set medic. We assigned somebody who was going to be taking care of that. In the Ohio shoot was very small, so essentially it was just me. But everybody came in. I did their temperatures. They signed actually a health representation form at that particular moment. And then when we went to the studio in Atlanta, they actually had a nice thing. Their own staff actually did double duty. So the studio took responsibility of anybody walking in their building had temperatures even before we got to them. Oh, and wow. So when they got to us, we had them sign our health representation form. And then it was done. And we did that every day. So even the crew members who had been, it was a 3-day shoot. But every day we took their temperatures again. It wasn't you signed off. It wasn't
a one-off type of thing.
No, it's like every day when you walked in the door, that was it. So.
Yeah. So at least you're nodding your head.
Yes. Okay. All the studios here are doing exactly what Philip said. Before you enter the building, they are having somebody at the entrance to take temperatures, including anybody that's doing deliveries, any food deliveries, everybody.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And also a lot of talk about staggered call times. So there's not a bottleneck in the morning of everybody trying to get in at, say, 7 a.m. So they're going to do, a lot of studios are talking about doing like a 7 a.m. call time slot at 7:30 a.m., 8 and on down the line. And you just have to register for your call time as soon as you possibly can, because you might not have the choice of, if you wanted to start at 7 a.m. and 7 a.m. is full.
When you say for some of the people who may not know what registering for your call time is, can you?
Oh, I mean, basically, like when you book the studio, you tell them what slot you want for your crew to arrive. And when that slot is full, then if somebody else wants a 7 a.m., they say, no, we're at max capacity for people coming in at 7 a.m. because they just don't want a line out the door with
Right.
people waiting to get temperatures taken, that kind of thing.
So I have a question, at least from a New York standpoint. The studio that we were at had probably 4 or 5 bays, but their current policy is that they weren't renting out any more than one production at a time. So that we essentially owned the space. They just had basically 2 studios that they weren't renting. Going to rent out, so that you didn't have that crossover. Are you hearing anything similar to that, or are people trying to figure ways of?
People are trying to figure ways just to get as much capacity as they can, just because obviously we've been closed now for 3 months, and especially some of the bigger places, the overheads are so high that they're like, we've got to be at capacity. What some studios that have multiple spaces are doing is they are requiring an equipment minimum for if you had a holding space. Like normally it'd be like, oh, it's just for holding, we'll give it to you at 50% rate, whatever. And now they're saying we cannot do that anymore. So basically you're going to have an equipment minimum for them to be able to cover overhead, knowing that they might only be, if they have 10 studios, they're going to be at 50% capacity, because people are going to be renting 5 for shooting and 5 for holding and social distancing areas. So, it's going to be interesting budget wise to see how to navigate all of this, but I'm hoping that clients are going to realize that this is necessary if we want to get back to work and stay back at work.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. And I mean, and luckily there are some spots that are good sized studios that are freestanding. They only have 1 studio. So you basically own that spot for the day, which is great. So I feel like that's the ones that are going to be really busy.
Question that came in from somebody who said, is it the people taking the test, is there any sort of special training required? Are you guys seeing any of that?
They're the touchless
thermometers, like point and shoot type of thing.
Point and shoot. It's color coded. They come back green, they're fine. If they come back yellow or red, they don't come in. So,
and here's another interesting question. Have you guys considered the thought about a contingency budget, just in case a primary like talent, if it's talent specific, gets sick or something like that? Like, is this falling into the same rules as sort of like, in the TNC where something, that seems like if somebody gets sick or something like that, it's going to fall in that sort of the TNCs that have sort of existed forever, right?
I mean, I feel like it would.
I agree with that. So.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of this disease, people get sick, people miss flights, people, every now and then you do have somebody that is primary that doesn't make it to set, and you just scramble and fix it.
I think it's important though to talk to your primary, basically all your leads though. It's like art department and wardrobe. And it's like, really have that conversation up front that, where have you been? What's that been like? If you have any, is there any remote chance that, in a couple of days down into this production that, and they need to be honest with you. And in some cases that we put people on standby.
Yeah, I was just going to, that was going to be my next question is like, are you putting lengthier holds? Is there going to be any sort of like paid holds? Like, I need you on standby, we'll give you a couple of bucks if you can be ready. Like, is that
I don't know about paid holds, but at least the way I've been trying to treat it is that the leads need to be somewhat responsible for filling their shoes should they become sick. So it's, if they have either a really strong, first assistant, depending on which department it's going to be, or if they have a peer who they talk to and say, look, I'm in the middle of this project, I should be fine. But if not, you might have to step in. Are you okay with that? We could figure that out. I personally would be uncomfortable about like, putting one lead on hold and then another one just,
How about you?
I mean, I agree with what Philip's saying. I think also a lot of it is going to be the agents themselves for principals are going to have to figure out how they want to navigate this. It's like, are they going to hold on to second options for longer, in case they need to swap somebody out? I mean, I think all of it is just going to have to be communication. Exactly like Philip said, it's like, know where your principals have been, know if they, think there could be a chance that there's been exposure, and then have that discussion and figure it out.
And then, are the talent agencies, has there been any discussion on the talent side? Like, okay, here's your primary talent, like for a fashion shoot, and we've got somebody who's got a similar look ready to go in case they become sick or something like that. Is anything like that? Or,
I haven't had really that need for that conversation. I mean, the last job that what we did try to do though is cast natural families together
Oh,
as
yeah.
much as possible, so they could be closer and start to come in that time. Basically worked, but you know, that was at least a place where we started to go. So,
how about you, Elise? You hear anything on the tail end about anything that's changing?
I mean, again, like New York is still in phase one. So all the conversations that we're having right now are a little bit of this, kind
Right.
of waiting to see if we're going to make it to phase two. It seems like we are at this point. So more serious conversations can happen because we'll have more of a timeline of when things can open, because we've just been sitting on our hands waiting. So
Right.
because earlier this week, our governor said that he might not let us go to phase one because there have been so many violations of people running around without masks, bars being open, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Right. So, Elise, the next question I want to start with you, and then we'll get Philip's input. In 2008, there was a gap of production, like a gap of content and things like that. Are you guys feeling like this is going to be the same situation, or what's your overall read on that? It seems like people are like, there was a lack of production. Like there was after 2008, there was 6 months where very little was being done. And it seems like this time around with the downturn and the stoppage, that things are trying to ramp up as quickly as possible. Is that sort of what you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And also I feel like a lot of brands and magazines were trying to do sort of the at-home shoots, finding photographers that maybe have a model wife or partner, a model significant, so they could basically do an in-house shoot. There have been some interesting through the screen shoots happening that I've seen, just so people can still continue having content. I've also talked to some brands that I produce for all the time that are like, the season's a wash for us. We're just going to focus on next season. We're not shooting anything until September.
Okay. How about you, Philip?
I've heard kind of a variety of things. I think a lot of people, just because of the nature of how this came on, there was stuff in the pipeline that had just put on hold. And if they have the opportunity that once things start rolling again, they're going to try to do it. I mean, that was sort of the nature of the two things that we did. They just needed the content. They had to wait. And once it became, safe to do it, then they were ready to do it. I also have been hearing in general that the ad agencies have been sort of scrambling to reimagine ads that don't feel sort of natural in our current environments, either by social distancing or how people are interacting with each other and whatnot. So there might be a delay as things are being reimagined, but my hope at least is that as things become more and more open, that the gap won't be nearly as long as it was in 2008.
So here's more of a theoretical. Is there a sense that there's going to be more location shoots because it offers more opportunity for social distancing, or just better controls in studio shoots because people want to get it out? Go ahead, Phil. Start with you.
From a producer's standpoint, I mean, the studios have been, I want to say better than I expected, but they've really kind of stepped up on the idea of how to manage it. So I think that is somewhat of a safer environment. I think there's a lot of advantages of shooting on location and impressing the clients to go for. I think the biggest thing that's going to be the question, and this actually came up in one of the Film LA seminars I was watching, is just how the neighborhoods are going to react to it, especially if you're going to be filming in places that have a lot of filming where these big crews are going to come in. Is like how the neighborhood is going to sign off on stuff. So that's just going to be a wait and see. But I would love to be able to be outside. It's much easier to social distance. We've got fresh air everywhere.
Yeah, Elise, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with what Philip's saying. I have been talking to clients that they're like, when we are able to shoot again, do we do studio? Do we do location? Ideally, yes, location would be amazing. But also if our mayor's office isn't granting permits, then obviously we're trapped in that studio situation. In my mind, baby stepping it perhaps with a studio shoot first makes sense to me. So people can kind of get used to being around again in a controlled environment. I completely agree with Philip that it's going to be interesting how neighborhoods anywhere in the US respond to having, 30, 40, 50, 60 people trampsing into their neighborhood, on their streets, you know what I mean? Because that can be scary. And
Yeah.
I think there is going to be pushback. And I think also we're going to have pushback on permits and size of crews, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah,
And,
I think it's going to be
really, sorry, go ahead, Philip.
I was going to say, I think it's going to be really important as an industry, though, is that, you know, we show best practices. If we're going to be able to do it, we need to make sure that our crews are, when they're out there, they're wearing their masks, they're doing what they need to do. So people can't point to, you know, situations where we always hear the story, well, so crew came in and they wiped out the neighborhood and whatnot.
Right.
You know, so if we want to do it, you know, we really need to be, you know, responsible to what's happening. So
there's at least back to you, is the New York mayor's office being responsive to, like, we got to get things going at all? Like, what's the political climate out there for trying to get production back online?
I mean, basically at this point on their website, they say they're not issuing any permits for non-media related shoots until after June 30th. So,
oh, really? So that's just it. And
that's a wrap.
Got it.
So, being responsive, yes.
Yeah.
They're
telling us not to do anything until June 30th. Right. Perfect. Okay. Well done.
Our permit laws are different than West Coast and some other areas, that if in New York, if you're shooting handheld, regardless of crew size, you can shoot without a permit.
Right.
I would be hesitant to do that with a large crew, just with the climate of what's going on, even being mindful of wearing masks and everything. You know, if it was a smaller crew, then of course. I've actually had a couple tiny shoots in my neighborhood that literally were 5 people, but it was like a photographer, a digital tech, a talent, and then one person that looked like they were doing everything, hair, makeup, styling, and so, you know, yeah. So, I mean, permit wise here, we have nothing legal until June 30th at the absolute earliest. And that can be.
And then, so somebody's asking about liability waivers in advance releasing photographers. I'm not really sure. I don't know. It seems to me like if you're doing your best efforts, there's not really anything else you can do. And for somebody to be like, to sign a waiver saying like, I release you of all responsibility for everything forever, does that seem sort of oppressive to have people sign something like that? At least let's start with you real quick.
I mean, I do think, just especially since production seems to be taking on more and more liability, I think it's important to have some kind of waiver that nobody can sue if they feel like they got COVID on your shoot. Where that waiver originates from is a good question. I think it should originate from the client, and the client should protect the production company that they hired to run their production. But you know,
And then Philip, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we have, you know, some assumption of risk waivers and whatnot. Like I said, we sent some to the client and to us. We were sort of on the idea that, you know, that we've heard enough of whether or not the waivers will stand up in court or whatnot, but our general sense is at least it's a starting point that somebody has acknowledged that they're coming into this environment and are agreeing to it beforehand. I don't see that that there's necessarily an issue with it. I just don't think that you can assume that just because you have a signature on something, nothing will happen. So. Right.
Okay. Well, the overall sense that I'm getting from talking to you two and some other people that are in Los Angeles that are doing some production work is that like everybody's really racing to try to get things back started. So that's ultimately very positive, I think, and I think it's really good. And it seems to me, with rare exception, that everybody's being very conscious about wearing masks and social distancing and being cool and stuff like that. So it sounds like within our little realm of production that things are on, you know, for as much as they can be, on an upswing. And it seems like that's what you guys are seeing too, and looking forward to getting back to work. So thank you both for coming on board and doing this little webinar. This has been great. Elise, thank you. Philip, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.